Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin in Springfield, Illinois, and I'm joined again with Jeff Berkowitz from Public Affairs TV in Chicago. Jeff and I are going to be reviewing not only some of the events that have been happening this week, which have been very significant, and we have to say that the Trump administration is still less than 2 weeks old, but Jeff, it has been moving along like a freight train going down the tracks. And I think what we are seeing is an organized administration that knows their agenda, has a strong leader, continues to move on a whole variety of policy fronts. And at the same time, it seems to me we're looking at a Democratic Party that has no leader and seems not to have any coalition around what the theme of their party is, what they stand for. And what we're seeing, and Jeff and I will talk about this in more detail, is this week where we've had the Trump cabinet selections going through the U.S. Senate, the Democrats there, which are primarily getting the news coverage this week, seem to be flopping around like a fish on the deck, trying to find any way they can just to oppose these picks. And Jeff, in the questioning, they often don't even go into any details about what these selections would do if they are confirmed. What's your take?
Well, the party out of power, the Democrats, always have this problem. There's no natural leader like a president, which is what the Republicans have. So somewhat this is natural, but I think the Democrats are even more disorganized, or appear so, than you would usually find. And the main thing that's been going on here, of course, we know, is getting the cabinet, getting the key, I'll call them key advisors, because these people are not, as was true with the Democratic Party in the last 4 years, just a cabinet that never met, never did anything. Many of these people, not all of them, are intimately involved in policy that's going on right now. And so it's important that, and the other thing, they're trying to, all of these people, or most of these people, are trying to get their hands around an agency or agencies that are deep states. So they don't have to just come in and say, hi, folks, and we're going to do this. They have to weed out people who are not being objective and who are contrary to everything about the philosophy that Trump was elected on and that he wants to implement. So that's a lot of work. And the short of it is, it looks like most, if not all of these advisors, the cabinet, are getting confirmed. The only one really so far that has been rejected, it seems like years ago, it was really just a few weeks ago, was Matt Gaetz. Remember him? But that after Matt, everybody's been through.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's easy to forget with all that we've gone through. But yeah, Pam Bondi, and I think a lot of people would say Pam Bondi, who has yet to be confirmed, but will make a much better attorney general.
She will surely be confirmed. So the only ones, it appears to me, that are in doubt of the 20 or so that's still coming up would be Tulsi Gabbard, most in doubt, RFK Jr., second most in doubt, and I don't think Kash Patel is in doubt anymore, and that's a really key position. He's going to be that director of the FBI. Everybody thought he was going to be a hard sell. So, you could lose Tulsi, and I think you could easily find somebody somewhat comparable to shake up things in the intel agencies and the oversight. And you could lose RFK Jr., and you could find somebody comparable but not as controversial at HHS, Health and Human Services.
You certainly could do that. I agree with you on that. The thing I would say, and I want the people to understand, is Trump is clearly a disruptor, and he is purposely picking people who are going to be disruptive of the status quo. And that's what we see in a Tulsi Gabbard, in an RFK Jr., in virtually all of these different picks. He is not picking just someone who has already come from the swamp, so to speak. He's picking people who have not been insiders, because he doesn't want insiders. He wants people who are going to shake things up. And this is just the voters' opinion of what they think of the Democratic Party at this time. And as you see, 57% of the voters have an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party. And then there's a similar poll, and this one, though, is asking those who identify as Democrats, what do you think of the party at this time? And as you can see, 45% says the party needs major changes, and 13% says it needs to be completely reformed. And I think those are pretty stunning poll results for if you're a Democrat office holder. We're going to have to watch what happens with the Democratic Party. But it seems to me, at some point, someone will emerge as a potential leader of the party. I don't know who that will be. I don't even have a clue at this point. I don't think the Democrats do either.
Well, Terry, you don't know what they stand for, the Democrats, because they don't know what they stand for, and they haven't decided, so they can't tell us. And of course, there are competing views. There's the squad, there's the most progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which I would say lost on November 5. And so there's a somewhat more moderate, more conservative wing of the party. But we see that more on Fox. We see Harold Ford. That is the more moderate, thoughtful wing of the Democratic Party. But Harold Ford, Harold Ford Jr. is somebody who once was in politics, but has been out of politics for a long time and has been a long time balanced, more liberal participant in discussions at Fox. And so if you want to see the wing of the Democratic Party that would be more popular, start watching Harold Ford. But that hasn't happened because, as I say, he's now a commentator on Fox to provide a different point of view. But clearly Schumer does not speak and doesn't speak very well for the Democratic Party. And Pelosi is long gone. And, Hakeem
Jeffries.
Hakeem Jeffries also is not. Those are the leaders, presumably. Hakeem Jeffries, because he is the minority leader in the House. Schumer is the minority leader in the Senate. Neither has emerged with a clear, articulate, thoughtful message for the Democratic Party.
Well,
so you don't know.
Pelosi was an extremist. I would say Chuck Schumer was an extremist. He's still leading in the Senate. And good point. Harold Ford Jr., a former Democratic congressman from Tennessee, is a very thoughtful Democrat. And the Democrats would do well. I don't necessarily think that Harold Ford Jr. per se is going to be the leader, but to look for people like that, and frankly, a surprise I think to most Republican voters around the country, is they look at John Fetterman, who a lot of people thought was going to be some wacko, and he's become a voice of civility and moderation. He still votes as a Democrat, but he's saying, he went down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with the president, and he's not there just to demonize the president. And so much of what we've been seeing, not only since Trump has taken office, but the themes of the Democrats over the last several years and in the campaign. The primary campaign theme of Kamala Harris was Orange Man Bad. That is not how you govern. And that continues to be in so many of these Senate hearings, on these confirmation hearings. We hear the Democratic senators not asking Kash Patel pertinent questions about, how are you going to crack down on Chinese spying within the United States? What are we doing about terrorism? They go back to things like January 6th and was Trump leading an insurrection? The American people are trying to put food on their table and get gasoline prices down and have a financial foundation where they can either buy a home or stay in their home. They don't give a damn about January 6th unless you're a far lefty. The American people have moved on, and if the Democratic Party wants to regain power, they're going to have to come up with some themes that address the concerns of the voters. As we just saw in the polling, so far they're not doing that.
Well, tremendous opportunity here for the Republican Party nationally and Donald Trump as President of the United States. is you haven't shown it, Terry, but the polling of Donald Trump is very favorable. I believe he's above 50% in his approval rating so far, which is unusual for Trump. He'd really, even in his better days before, had been at best in the mid 40s. And so he's doing very well so far. I emphasize so far. And he's staying away from looking back so far. He would do well to continue to avoid, for the reasons you just said. Don't look back, look forward. Keep talking about what you're going to do. When you get a win, go with it and talk about the future. If you get a loss, bury it and just keep going on. But so far he's doing that, and so he's on a roll doing well. The Republicans are following him and doing well. He's got coattails at the moment. So if he runs into trouble, actually, he can be helpful if it's Tulsi Gabbard, if it's RFK Jr. He can put in a word and he can swing some, certainly Republican senators, which is all he has to worry about now in confirmation, because they have 50, the Republicans have a 53-47 majority in the Senate. And these confirmations are only determined by the Senate. So if he keeps all the Republicans in line, or all but three, they all get confirmed. And Trump is a big plus. And so your point, yes, right now it's all going well, but as you know, Terry, politics can change on a dime.
It can change on a dime, that's true. But I take your point, and it's a good point. Trump is more popular today than he was at any point in his first term. And I think this again shows the American people, the sentiment of the American voter is, we just went through 4 years of hell. We had inflation. We've had this massive influx of illegal aliens coming in, a rise in crime, wars breaking out in Ukraine, wars breaking out in the Middle East. They want to go back to, as used to be said about 100 years ago, normalcy. We want to go back to where we have a standard economy that we can thrive in and peace abroad. And so Trump's polling numbers are very high. And even among those Republican senators who are not necessarily Trump fans, they're going to go along with the Trump agenda because they better go along or the voters will take note of that. One of the things that we should point out, I'm going to show this clip here. There's no audio on it, but one of the things that did happen is Trump signed his first bill that had been passed by the new Congress. This is the Laken Riley Act. She, again, the co-ed that was beaten to death by an illegal alien. And what this bill would do is say, if you are an illegal alien who has been arrested for any kind of a crime, you are going to not only be arrested, you are going to continue to be detained. The illegal alien that killed Laken Riley had been arrested 3 different times, and 3 different times he was let go. And this is where Trump and obviously the family of Laken Riley say, this should never have happened. If law enforcement was doing their job, this would never have happened. And yet we still have so many of the Democrats saying Trump is a Nazi, his goons are out there sweeping up just poor grape pickers and lettuce pickers who are just trying to provide for their family. They ignore the fact of the threat to the nation by the violence that has come into our country.
And I believe that bill, Laken Riley bill, was passed in the Senate, I believe, on a bipartisan, fairly significant bipartisan vote. I think 12 Democrats, if I have this right, voted for that bill. I don't know what happened in the House. The Senate bill, I believe, came up first. So there are Democrats across this country who have noticed what you've been talking about earlier, emphasizing in your lead-in, that the Democratic Party needs to get a grip. They lost. They don't want to, these Democrats who are left in the Senate don't want to go down. So it would be popular in many of their states to work with Trump and the Republicans. I mean, Fetterman is no dummy. Fetterman, you and I were critical of him when he had his stroke, not of him, but we were critical of the notion that he would have a full recovery and can function as a senator. well, we were wrong. At least I was wrong. You
Well,
speak for
I
yourself.
will admit that I was wrong about him because I thought he was going to be like so many of these others, that is just a knee-jerk anti-Trump guy, and that's all he was going to be about. I was wrong on that. He is a much more thoughtful individual. And, you know, I don't expect John Fetterman or any Democrat to be voting in line like they're a Trump supporter. We want to have people who are critical of the administration because the administration will be wrong on the issues at times. We need to hear their voice, but it has to be a responsible voice, and I think that's what John Fetterman is showing.
When he came back from visiting Trump in Mar-a-Lago and discussing with him serious issues and finding where they agreed and where they didn't disagree, he got a lot of criticism from the Democrats. Why are you saying that? And he said, you know, Trump's not such a bad guy. And that, he took a lot of criticism for that. And he came back. He didn't just shut up. He said, well, you know, I think I should be representing all of the people of Pennsylvania as a senator, Democrats, Republicans, and everybody. And so, and he noticed implicitly, you know, Pennsylvania has been historically, and perhaps again is perhaps a purple state. It's pretty evenly divided between Republicans and Democrats. There are a lot of hunters in, you know, portions of Pennsylvania. Gun control is not so popular in those. There was pro-life aspects in Pennsylvania. So all he's saying, he's not going to be in favor of a number of Republican things, but he says there's nothing wrong with talking with Republicans and finding areas where you agree. He says that's why I was sent here, to govern, to
Right.
work with.
And, you know, let me insert,
everybody.
Jeff. You and I are older than the average voter right now, but we remember, you know, when Lyndon Johnson became president, and of course he was elected in his own term in 1964, you had governing back then, far more than you have now. You didn't have the Republicans being knee-jerk against what Lyndon Johnson was promoting. The Republican votes in the Senate back then are who carried the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And it would be wonderful if we could go back and say, Democrats, you know, if you want to restore your party, if you want to restore leadership and governing, look at John Fetterman. Oppose the Trump administration when he is doing something that is against the principle of the Democratic Party, but just don't be knee-jerk against every single thing the man is trying to do. And yet that's what we are still seeing. I want to get to some of the sound bites. First of all, aside from the nominees, we also have a brand new press secretary. You know that Biden's press secretary was criticized for often just having a binder where she flipped the pages and read out of a book, that she was not informed on the issues. We saw a stark difference with Caroline Leavitt, who she had worked in the Trump campaign, and she used multimedia to make the point about the crackdown on illegal aliens, that these are not just nonviolent people coming into the country trying to find the American dream. Let's listen to a bite here.
On January 23rd, ICE San Francisco arrested a citizen of Mexico unlawfully present in the United States who has been convicted of continuous sexual abuse of a child aged 14 years or younger. ICE St. Paul has arrested a citizen of Honduras who was convicted of fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct with a minor. ICE Buffalo arrested a citizen of Ecuador who has been convicted of rape. ICE Boston arrested a citizen of the Dominican Republic who has a criminal conviction for second-degree murder. This criminal was convicted of murder for beating his pregnant wife to death in front of her 5-year-old son.
So, Jeff, violence, as we're seeing in these arrests being made by ICE, and obviously they I think, picked up over 7,000 people in this first week. But give me your take. You cover Illinois, in Chicago at least, the politics of Chicago, far more than I. What is happening on this issue, and is there any kind of a break between the support for Mayor Johnson and the governor, both of whom are kind of still defending these influx of immigrants?
Well, they're doubling down. Because as we said, there are three major confirmation discussions, battles coming up. the first one we can turn to now, Kash Patel, but she raised the issue of violence. Kash Patel is up to be director of FBI, and they're intimately involved with DOJ and others in dealing with the migrant issue. And the migrant issue is very big in Chicago and other big cities. And it has two people, the mayor, Brandon Johnson in Chicago, the governor, J.B. Pritzker, who are just doubling down. Whatever's gone on with Biden, it was wonderful. Oh, Pritzker saying, "Oh, I've always been against, violent criminals and all that." Nobody said, "Could you give me the list? Could you tell me, have you ever done anything as a policy to apprehend violent criminal immigrants?" And of course, the Democrats make this point when the new press secretary was asked, "Are you focusing on illegal or are you focusing on migrants who are criminals?" And she said, "Well, they have all the people we're focusing on have come across the border illegally." And she could make the point, yes, our initial focus is on violence, but you don't want to say that people who cross the border illegally have done nothing wrong. But getting back to your point, Pritzker and Johnson are doubling down. Illinois is not really facing up to the issue. And Kash Patel, in particular, is a good nominee because he has taken the Democrats head on in the Senate, and he's differed from Trump. He said, I differ with those pardons of all of the folks on January 6th. If you assault a policeman, as a number of those protesters did at January 6th, I am saying, no, you should be doing time. We're not pardoning you and so forth.
Let me go to a bite I want to go, because the other thing is the Democrats are trying to make the case on a number of these nominees that they fear the Trump administration is going to be inserting politics into the FBI, going to be inserting politics at DOJ. The irony is, as we will hear so many of the times, that's what was happening throughout the Biden administration, that went out of their way to have these local prosecutors try to lock up Donald Trump and throw all these charges against him. Here is Ted Cruz asking Kash Patel about some of these allegations that Trump led an insurrection on January 6th.
Days in advance, Senator, we were in the Oval Office on an unrelated national security matter with the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and myself. And the president authorized up to 20,000 plus National Guardsmen and women to secure any security measures necessary related to the Capitol. So we were moving to the fullest extent of the law before the requisite request came from a local governing authority days ahead of time.
And while you were chief of staff at DOD, how many times did DOD approach Capitol Police and ask if they needed National Guard assistance?
I believe those letters are well documented, numerous instances, and numerous of those instances, those requests were shut down.
Now, am I correct that the Capitol Sergeant at Arms said assistance was unnecessary?
That's correct, Senator.
Who did the Sergeant at Arms report to?
The Speaker of the House.
That would have been Nancy Pelosi at the time. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
And would that also be Chuck Schumer, then the Senate Majority Leader?
The Sergeant at Arms, yes, Senator, reports up there.
And of course, the issue of whether or not there's politics involved, continuing with the nominee of Tulsi Gabbard, who is selected to be the Director of National Intelligence. Let's listen to part of her opening statement and how she was charging that these institutions of our intel community have been already loaded with politics.
Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end. President Trump's re-election is a clear mandate from the American people to break this cycle of failure, end the weaponization and politicization of the intelligence community, and begin to restore trust in those who've been charged with the critical task of securing our nation.
So we've just heard there from Tulsi Gabbard, and she has talked about, look, the CIA has already been weaponized and politicized and so forth. Okay, Blanken talked to took the intel, 51 former intel guys, and he said, "Oh, this is just Rush. The laptop is just Russian disinformation." Completely wrong. All those 51, if they were still there, they should have been fired because they had weaponized the intel agency. They had politicized. And she's saying, we don't want to do this, okay? And she's right. That's the good part of Tulsi Gabbard. You want to hear the bad part? The reason why she's got trouble? Because she was she was and is a defender of Snowden, the guy who went off with millions of documents, took things that he shouldn't have and disclosed them, and ended up going to Russia, I guess, and I think now
Well, he
it's
didn't
citizen of
flee to Russia. He was transporting, going through Russia, and the Obama administration basically clamped down, and he got stuck there. So he's in Russia, but it wasn't like he was a turncoat that was wanting to go to Russia. Gabbard was being pressed to call him a traitor by Senator Bennett of Colorado, a Democrat. She did not want to say that he was necessarily a traitor, and others who were reporters who got some of these documents were saying if he wanted to, he could have sold these if he was a traitor to the Russians, to the Chinese. He didn't do that. He handed these documents over to various reporters, and later it was found out that what this uncovered was that the intel community was breaking the law, was acting against the Constitution by spying on the American people. And James Clapper, who was the head of DNI before, lied to Congress about that, which she brought up in one of her comments.
Jerry, the way to do this is become a whistleblower. There are procedures set up.
Well, we can argue. I don't want to get down what Snowden should or shouldn't have done.
Here's the point.
The point is that there was certainly politics going on prior to these appointees of Trump.
Okay, but the point is she is in trouble.
I want to get to this bite of RFK because he's another question. And of course, let's listen to what he was saying. And he again, a very different guy who's saying it's our food that is poisoning us, and the American people are sick because of the way that we're getting this food.
In my advocacy, I've often disturbed the status quo by asking uncomfortable questions. Well, I'm not going to apologize for that. We have massive health problems in this country that we must face honestly. Should I be so privileged as to be confirmed, we will make sure our tax dollars support healthy foods. We will scrutinize the chemical additives in our food supply. We will remove financial conflicts of interest from our agencies. We will create an honest, unbiased, gold standard science at HHS, accountable to the president, to Congress, and to the American people.
Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. have something in common. They both have good points, but they both made statements in the past, done things in the past that are problems for their confirmation. So wrapping up Tulsi quickly, she's pointed out there are constitutional issues. She's right to raise those points, but she's done the same. She said we should talk with people. She's talked to Ashar al-Assad in Syria. Problems. She hasn't done it the right way. So we could discuss that for 20 minutes. But that's her problem. And the problem with RFK Jr., statements made in the past, he says he's not anti-vax, he sounded anti-vax. He's not saying, okay, we got to radicalize agriculture. No, we do it. He's not saying that. But he's made statements in the past that are problems.
He's made questionable statements, I will say this, on vaccines. And I think that is, the Democrats did point out some of the question. But, what I like about him is we do have this chronic diseases going through. You have young kids who have fatty liver disease, which used to be just a symptom of old age. People only have it. Now you got young kids. So he's bringing the point that our food supply has become why we are getting sick, and we need to look at food as medicine, which is certainly something I think is a worthy discussion to have. The other thing I would point out that these people are not going to be a Lone Ranger. Donald Trump is not a wallflower, and they are not going to be making decisions within these cabinet selections that he doesn't agree with.
Yeah, the main point here is they could get along okay. You could find somebody that makes constitutional issues, that makes those points that Gabbard made. You can have somebody that makes the points that
Okay, we gotta
RFK
get
Jr.
out, but
made
yeah.
about the signs, but they'll survive if those two are
We'll
knocked down.
continue to follow,
That's-
folks, and we'll see you hopefully next week. In the meantime, take care. Give us your comments.